Hey, welcome back to the Sound Horizons podcast brought to you by Toontrack. I'm Rick, and although I'm not the reason you're here, it doesn't hurt that I am here. Listen, today, to continue this whole all we ever do is talk to the coolest people in the music industry trend that we started, I would like to introduce and present to you a household name in the world of awesomeness. And again, I've used this line before, but if he's not a household name, you don't have a house of awesomeness. I'm just letting you know that's your problem, not his. We today are talking to the man, the myth, the legend, one of the hardest working and most incredible drummers on the scene today. My friend and yours, ladies and gentlemen, we welcome Will Hunt. Will, welcome.
Hey, I mean, how do you beat that introduction? I don't know how we top that.
You don't have to. You're here. I mean, look, you showed up. You did your part. Now all you have to do is answer questions and pretend like you're interested in what I'm talking about.
And as to quote the great Danish drum, happy to be here.
Yes, exactly.
I'll be here.
And you just recently, I mean, you've been all over, even recently. At the time of we're filming this interview, you just getting back into the States you've been back maybe a couple weeks, right? Weren't you in somewhere exotic? You were in Italy at the first half of the month, and you were in Puerto Rico, or you were somewhere you were all over. I can't keep track of you.
Yeah, I left for Italy. I did a short tour on my own. I do these old tours in Italy, 4 or 5 times a year with a couple of different projects that I have there. And I was there from mid-April until the beginning of May. I was home for about 24-ish hours, and then went to Nashville to start rehearsals with Evanescence. And then we rehearsed for a few days, and we went to Puerto Rico, played 2 shows there. Then Puerto Rico back to Florida to play Welcome to Rockville, and then we went to Ohio, where we took a couple of days in a studio there, did a little writing, and then went and played the Sonic Temple Festival up there in Columbus, which used to be Rock on the Range.
Right.
So I just got home. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, so you just did Rockville, which is like 4 days, isn't it? In Florida, that's the big one. And I forgot who you guys were on stage at the same time as I think Sum 41 or someone else. Someone was telling me that it was like a volume battle. It was to see who could out volume the other the stage. And I saw a video. I actually saw a video clip of it on YouTube where someone was just standing sort of in the middle objectively. Well, in both acts are going off like with full production, the whole 9 yards. And it was kind of insane.
Amazing. That's gotta be chaotic.
Oh, it is. But do you enjoy that though? Do you enjoy the festival circuit where it's all the multi-band stuff over the summer, or are you just sort of used to it at this point in time?
I love it, man. Like I've been part of it, I'm still a fan, just like you or many of the people that we hang out with because they're cool. I'm still a fan, so I like being able to go and check out all these different bands. Some of them I haven't seen, some of them I have seen before. It's a cool opportunity to be able to do that. And then there's, for lack of a better way to put it, it's kind of like, going to high school where you get to see your buds every day, and you go in and, there's this camaraderie where, you're up watching someone that you really dig on the side of their stage. So as a kid and as a fan, you're like, how did I get here? And then there's also when you're playing, you've got your peers and your friends over on the side of the stage checking you out. And it's just a really good, healthy environment. And it's just, I don't know, I love it. I really do love it.
Well, one of the things that is super, I mean, it's not uncommon in our profession, but one of the things that's super unique about you is you generally have 4 or 5 different things that you're involved in as a player or band member or at the same time. And that's not just in the summer, that's like all year round. And I know, again, Heroes and Monsters you have all these different things going on. Evanescence, you're in the studio.
Yeah.
And this is one of those ridiculous cliche questions, but you also are a dedicated family man. So it's like, how do you kind of balance this creative energy against all these projects? Because they all demand so much from you and they all demand so very different things. And one last long elongated, you don't play drums like a normal human. Like, you're not a guy that sits behind a drum set and is just like, oh, I'm going to play. You like every single snare hit is a fucking car crash. Every single kick drum, it's like, so that is the part that has always overwhelmed me, is that I don't know how you even physically stand at the end of the night. So how do you do all of this and then still stay as vibrant and young and healthy as you are?
I don't know. I mean, honestly, I mean, it's the kind of thing where a lot of times what I do is I don't think about it. I just go, I just kind of, all right, hit the go button. Here we go. Boom. We just go. And as far as the physicality of what I do, I mean, I work out a lot. I constantly in the gym, jogging, all of that stuff, because of what I do is just a physical instrument. And I've always said this, and you as a vocalist probably know this, but everybody's like, God, particularly the way that you play, that's so physical, I mean, how does it feel to be the hardest working guy on the stage? And I go, well, I might have a contention with that, because I kind of think that singers probably exert as much energy as a drummer like me exerts, because when you're pushing all that air and you're singing, or like it's like Amy does or whatever, I mean, she is pushing some air, or Mark Slaughter, whomever it is that sings like that, they're using every muscle in their body to sing.
Yeah.
And that's a very physical thing. So, but I think in order to do that at the level that we do it at, you have to be in shape. And I know that I do. And then I think another weird thing about it is that I matured very slowly, and not to sound like Forrest fucking Gump, but like my mom always said I was a late bloomer. She did. She always said, you're a late bloomer, son. And I hated that when I was younger, but as I've gotten older, because I'm 52 years old, man. As I got older, I was like, God, that's kind of cool, dude, that I was a late bloomer.
Well, it helps, right?
But,
so when you, okay, so let's just, we can keep going in this direction, but I want to take one step back, because I think ultimately you're incredibly well known in all rock metal circles as being this kind of chameleon drummer that's played with all these folks, and you've got a very unique style, as we've just kind of touched on, and it's amazing. But when you go back to kind of like the start of that journey, you're the guy that ends up playing for every drummer's hero drummer, Tommy Lee. So you're Tommy Lee's drummer early on in your career. And I know you're a fan. Long before you were his drummer, you're just a Tommy Lee fan. It's evident just in the way you play.
He's my hero.
Yeah.
Not just fan, a super fan.
So is that a nerve-wracking experience for you when it starts? Or did you feel like because you were such a fan, you were like, this is it, I'm ready, I'm prepared, I can do this?
I tell you what, man, the pressure was, and this is a funny story, and I've said it a couple times, but the pressure was not once I got that gig and started playing with him. The pressure was the audition and just getting in the freaking door to audition for this guy. And
I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine.
Insane.
Every drummer had to be there, wanting to be Tommy Lee's drummer.
Dude, it was a cattle call, and like I had made friends with Marty O'Brien, who now played. He'd been with Lee DeFore for years. You had to know Marty, basically. Yeah. And really good friend, and he's now with Daughtry. But at the time, he was Methods of Mayhem's bass player, and I met him when my band Scrape was on tour with. We were on the Extreme Seal tour with Morbid Angel, Static X, Pantera, and Slayer, and he was filling in for Static X. Long story short, I found out he was Tommy's drummer or bass player. I'm like, dude, I've never met Tommy. What's that like? We had a conversation. Stephen Perkins from Jane's Addiction was the drummer at the time, and I jokingly said to him, hey, if Stephen shits the bed, give me a call. Well, 8 months later, he tracked me down through this girl, through this other girl, through this other guy, through this other girl. This is well before cell phones were super common. And I get a message on my answering machine, and it's him, and he's like, hey, remember you told me to call you? Well, I'm calling you. Tommy's auditioning drums tomorrow. Like, I'm in Florida. This is in LA. And so I called him back. I'm like, dude, listen, I'm down to come out and do that. But if this is like a thing where there's all these ringers out there, it's like, I'm broke. I don't have any fucking money. It's going to cost me $700 that I don't have to fly out there. So he said, no, come out, man. There's really nobody here. So I spend my last, borrowed the money to get out there, go to the third encore where they're having the auditions. And it's so funny, man. There's like 30 dudes in there. I'm like, this motherfucker lied his ass off to me, right? I said, these are guys that had already auditioned. Most of them, they were kind of being told to leave. So out of the rehearsal room walks this big, really intimidating guy, Big Viggy
Yep.
Vignola, who, and
Rest your
rest in
soul.
peace, my brother.
Rest
His
in
birthday
peace,
was
brother.
yesterday, by the way.
Yeah.
Love that dude. So he
Yeah.
walks out and he comes up to me. He's got this yellow notepad and like, who the fuck are you? I'm like, I'm Will. I'm Marty's friend. You know, he told me to come out. And he's looking at the list. He goes, well, you're not on this fucking list. Get this fucking guy out of here. He's like having me thrown out. I'm like, no, dude, I'm telling you, I'm Marty's friend. Just asked. I'm not asking shit. Get out. So, I mean, this thing, I almost didn't get the audition. Luckily, at that moment, the door opens and Marty and Tommy walk out to go take a piss. And I'm like, dude, Marty, he's trying to throw me out. He's like, shut the fuck up. It's like,
Wow.
I was going to get the beat down from Viggy.
Nice.
And Marty runs there. I'm like, no, dude, no. That's my friend, man. He's like, okay, well, you're fucking going last. I'm like, okay, as long as I'm going. So I'm standing outside of this rehearsal room, and I don't know who's in that room, but they're playing their fucking ass off. And I'm like, who the fuck is that? And out walks Marty again. And I'm like, dude, who's in there? I thought you told me there were no ringers or weren't anybody coming. There's 30 people here or whatever. They're like, oh, it was Brian Tichy. And I'm like,
oh, man.
You know, beast.
Ouch.
I'm like,
yeah, exactly.
I'm like, why did you call me? So then they keep Ryan in there. They call this other dude in there, right? And he plays and he sounds okay. And the only thing I know about that is they stop playing, and through the door I hear this guy scream. Wah! And I'm like, what the fuck is happening in there? So they kick him out. Ryan stays in. Stephen Perkins is in there helping out with the auditions. So you've got Tommy, Brian Tichy, and Stephen Perkins in there hanging out. And so I walk in and they're like, they show me the picture of the dude that just came in, and the scream was because after he got done playing, he stood up and he blew fire. So they're showing me this Polaroid of this dude that stood up and blew fire. And I'm like,
nice.
Why am I fucking here, dude?
Exactly.
What is happening?
That's amazing.
So they put Ryan Tichy on the electronic kit next to me, put me on the acoustic kit. And they're like, okay, you ready? Like, what are you going to do? And I'm like, well, I'm going to shoot rockets out of my ass.
Yeah, exactly.
And Tommy loved that. And I played and I said, fuck it, I got nothing to lose here. So I just went full fucking force and gave it everything that I had. And, you know, as I'm playing, I noticed Tommy looking at me with his eyes real big and Marty looking at me the same way. I'm like, oh, man, that's it. I'm sucking. And it was the opposite. They're like, dude, we thought you got possessed by a fucking devil. And I'm like, well, you know, whatever. And well, long story short, I got the gig because the main reason wasn't that I was better than Brian Tichy because he's amazing, but it was just that Tommy and I got on as friends, you know, and he was like, dude, I can hang out with you.
Well, and how much of that vibe, that dude, can we be together? I mean, that's a very big part of working at the level you work at. I think a lot of people take that for granted. I think a lot of people think that it is not, again, to your point, amazing. There's lots of amazing players out in the world. I mean, incredible. There's never been a time in human history with better musicians than we have now, thanks to so many things. But whether or not they can, you know, hold a conversation at dinner, that doesn't seem like an important thing. But when you're on a bus or on the road with someone for 3 or 4 months at a time, that becomes a pretty big deal. Yeah, that's pretty huge.
Dude, that's and I tell people this, and young guys coming up all the time. Yeah, there's all these guys on YouTube that, man, they look fucking incredible in their bedroom, playing their asses off and playing things that, you know, a lot of us can't play, nor do I care to play, but whatever. I'm fascinated with some of the skill. But at the same time, it's like, okay, cool. Now, go do that and tour and perform and write songs and get along with people and learn how to eat fucking bread sandwiches for, you know, 2 weeks at a time and do all that shit and then come back to me. And there's a reason that I think that a lot of those guys don't really break out of their bedroom is because they don't do that. They don't have that skill set. They don't know how to. There's 50% you're playing, there's 50% the hang and dealing with all the bullshit. And sometimes that's even more. And I think that's, you know, I remember one time I auditioned for this other band when I was right out of high school. And, you know, I was like, you know, I don't think I'm going to get this. You know, I think they're hiring this other guy. It's like, and the guy told me, he's like, just remember, it's not you just auditioning for them. They're auditioning for you too, because you got to be able to hang out with these people. You don't want to get in a situation where you're in a band where you hate the people. And I didn't understand that at 17, but I really understand it now. And, I've been in situations where, man, this is miserable, but
Sure.
I've also a situation like Evanescence where we are really lucky that we have each other and that we like each other. We hang out. I mean, I've been in the band. We just celebrated Troy and I 17 years of being in the band.
Jeez, that is a long time to do anything. Wow.
It's a long time, man. So it's just like, the hang is really important for sure. But, with Tommy, and to his point, like to this day, we're still friends. We still talk all the time. We still, whenever we're close to each other, we hang out,
Let me ask you this about that part of your life. So when you were playing with Tommy, for the drummers out, this is where we geek out about drum stuff. When you were playing with Tommy, your drums physically were big instruments. They were big drums. Were you a big drum player before Tommy? Or did Tommy have sort of this prerequisite that if we're going to have a drum set on stage, because he's been the guy ratcheting up big drums his entire career, or was that a prerequisite to the gig? How did that work for you then?
So I remember that prior to that, I really studied Tommy Lee as much as you can, but pre-internet, that's another thing people forget about, but, because we're old, but, I had a Pearl, I started off with a double kick Pearl kit, because back in the day, he was a Pearl guy.
Yeah. Big time.
And I had, basically his setup in an export kit. And when I finally got my first real gig, I got, the Pearl BLX series, same thing with the power toms and same setup as Tommy.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. The BLX, that's what I had. And, and then right around that time, when Dr. Feelgood came out, was when he switched to DW and got the big, actually funny, geeking out on drums again. In the video for Dr. Feelgood, he's still a Pearl artist.
Yeah, and he kicks the kick drum over and you can see it. Yeah, he had that 32-inch marching drum that he had the head put on. And I was so angry that he kicked the drum. I remember being a kid like, how much money does he have that he can just kick those drums over? But to your point, then it was either later that year or maybe the next year, they did that big, crazy Russia stunt where they did that huge show in Russia with all the bands. And that was the first time I saw him play a DW kit. And I was like, what the hell is that? That's not a Pearl kit. Because all of us had Pearl kits because Tommy and all the guys from that era had Pearl. I mean, that's what you did. You had a Pearl kit. So, okay, so now...
You were serious.
Right. So you were a Pearl guy, but now you're in Tommy's band, so you're going to have to play DW at that point, yeah?
Well, I never got to a point pre-Tommy where Pearl had offered me anything. But back up a little bit. So basically, when Dr. Feelgood came out and he kind of switched to that whole deal, I was in a situation where I couldn't afford anything else other than what I had. So I kind of had to play what I had. So I stuck with that. But fast forward to maybe right around the time that the John Farabi record came out, which to me is a drum Bible. There was a music store in town that I knew the drum guy there, and he called me up. He was like, Will, somebody just brought in a random 30-inch old school Ludwig, 30-inch by 16 kick drum that's been fitted with legs, and I can get this thing to you for $200. And I'm like, all right, I'll go rob whatever I got to rob. I'll go sell a quarter bag to whoever I got to go sell it to go buy this freaking thing. And I went down and I got it, and that was my first big kick drum, and that had to be in like 93, maybe 94. Ugh. And so at that point, I became a big drum guy.
Okay.
And then when I got the gig with him, at the time I'd had a Mapex endorsement, but the guy left Mapex, and I wasn't a huge fan at the time anyway. So Tommy, he said to me, he's like, hey, if you get this gig, have you thought about what kind of kit you want? I said, well, I'd love a DW kit. And he's like, yeah, but what color? Like, what are you thinking about? And I said, well, now mind you, this is 2002, right?
It's your most famous drum set. So of course, yeah, it's your origin story.
Yes. And it has not aged well, unfortunately, but it's, whatever.
Yeah.
But, I've had arguments about this, to the ends of time, but basically it was prior to the movie even coming out. But I say, man, I've always wanted a General Lee drum set because, dude, I grew up watching the Dukes of Hazzard on
and it's
Friday
just that
night.
Simple on CBS. It's just that simple.
It's that simple. Trying to turn it into something else is fucking long.
Ridiculous. Yeah, it's
Now I
ridiculous.
understand what it
Of
means
course.
now, and I
Of
get
course.
that.
Yeah.
I get it, and you know, I'm publicly apologized. Like, hey, I'm sorry. I didn't.
That's
It was
insane.
not done with that in mind.
Of
But
course not.
anyways, he kind of laughed at me like, okay. So I got the gig, and I go out there to do the first rehearsal, and backs up this truck. And he's like, dude, check this out. And he brought it in, and it was the General Lee drum kit. And I was like, good Lord, man. And they had called the guy that painted the car for the show and gotten the exact formula of the paint and the exact stencil that they use on the car for the O1s and stuck it on there. It was amazing. I still have that kit. I mean,
you should.
Yeah, and I play it out. I played it out a few times, just for shits and giggles because I love it. But it sans the rebel flag on the kick drum head. It's just a white head,
But the reality is, and I mean it with the utmost of respect, that kit drew more attention to you when it first came. I mean, it was like, who's this drummer? It's like, wow. The big question every drummer has is like, who the hell is going to play drums for Tommy Lee and not have a heart attack every night trying to impress their boss? But then, how is this guy going to live in the shadow? No matter what Tommy Lee's doing on stage, he's still always he's Tommy. You're like, he's that guy. So it was, I think it was the combination of the two. You become this unforgettable part of that entire experience, the Tommy Lee solo project, that whole thing. You're inexplicably tied together. So then when that winds down, that's a jump start, right? Playing for Tommy. Where does your mind go? Like, do you panic when that winds down, or are you like, shit, I got to get out there and find something to do? I mean, how do you deal with that? It's a completely different world now.
Well, I mean, that's a really, really good question that I think doesn't get asked enough and discussed enough because, being the son of a psychiatrist, I'm, let's see, uber sensitive to mental health and things like that. And I think that one of the things that doesn't get discussed enough and talked about, particularly among musicians where we can lean on each other, so to speak, is about that roller coaster. And at the time that I got the Tommy Lee gig, I had another band called Scrape, and we were signed to RCA, and our first record had come out, and it was a really cool record. And, same old story, but we were in the process of writing for a second record when the Tommy Lee thing happened. And I looked at it like an opportunity. We needed new management. We needed a kickstart for Scrape to kind of keep things rolling. And so I looked at it like, you know what? I'm going to go get this fucking gig. And then I'm going to parlay that into finding us new management and trying to kickstart this thing. And I had that in the back of my head. And lo and behold, Tommy's manager at the time loved the album and loved what we were doing with Scrape and said, dude, when this is done, I'll pick that up, man. We'll march this right through and we'll start going. And they did. And, but after in between all that stuff, there's this big, huge up, and then there's this big, huge down, and then there's this big, huge up. And that has been the deal. And when you go to that down part and you don't know what's next, I mean, mentally that is taxing. And it's not only taxing because you go, well, is this it for me? Do I have anything else? And when you dedicated your life to something like this, I mean, sometimes it's like, what's left for me? What am I going to do? I'm going to go fucking roof houses. I mean, what's next? And, and trying to find work that isn't music between all those peaks and valleys and all that shit. And, that's a huge response for me when people go, well, why are you in so many projects? And that's why, because, I've never been in a situation where I've made so much money from what I'm doing to where in between albums or cycles or whatever that I can just hang out and, go fuck off at the beach. I still fuck off at the beach, but
sure. Wow. You have to. You're from Florida.
It's not on the
in
ring.
Your blood. Yeah.
It's in my blood. But, it's like in Evanescence, I love that situation. We're a great band, but, it's not like, don't believe the internet. The internet says I'm worth $42 million. I want to know where my fucking money is. It's like,
that's a beautiful thing.
Where's my fucking money? It's like, there's another guy out there that's taking my money, but you got to hustle, man.
Well, you talk about something that we've talked to a couple of other guests about, and I think you bring up a good point. So I want to ask you from a psychological standpoint,
Yeah.
When you're in the situation with Tommy and you're starting basically your career on this level, do you ever go through a bout of imposter syndrome where you're afraid they're going to find out you don't deserve to be here, you're not good enough, you're not? Is that anything you still deal with even today? I mean, as someone that's been doing this your whole life, is it an issue for you? Because spoiler alert, the other people we've talked to on like we bring it up, it's like, yeah, it's a real thing that real people that do real work are still dealing with, and it seems to be very unique and specific to the creative community, especially. So, give me some thoughts on that.
Question. That's another great question. I think that all the time, because in people, all you got to do is read comments. It's just like, well, in that section of that song, I would have done a 7/8 samba beat, blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't give a fuck what you would have done. Yeah. That's how I look at it. Like, I don't care. You know what? I make music for me. I make music because I want to see, 50,000 people all moving at the same time. And you know what? That doesn't take insane chops. You know what that takes? That takes insane groove. That takes insane sensibility. It's like, and I'll say, okay, Mike Portnoy, love him. Super technical guy, can play his ass off. Play circles around me. All right, I got one name for you, Phil fucking Rudd. You know how many people have lost their virginity to that fucking dude?
All of them.
Millions. You know how many people have lost their virginity to Mike Portnoy? None.
Not many. No.
And that's not a jake to Mike Portnoy, because I've never met him, but I think he's a fantastic drummer. I love the way he plays. But that's my point. It's like, man, you got to choose your lane, and Mike Portnoy has chosen that lane, and he is fan-fucking-tastic at it. Whereas I chose a lane of, like, I consider myself to be, I don't know if there's such a word for it, but a technical Phil Rudd. I just like to fucking groove, dude. That's my specialty. And and all these guys that talk about chops and all this stuff, it's like, I love it, man. And I go and watch people like that, and I'm fascinated by it. But there comes a point to me where it's like, I just play me a fucking groove, man. Play me something that makes me bob my head, or I see a bunch of chicks shaking their asses and dudes dancing their ass off. That's what I want to do.
So with that in mind, then, over the course of the time, have you ever been offered a gig or had an opportunity where you looked at it and you immediately knew you weren't the right guy for that gig?
Absolutely.
Can you talk about any of them? Well, everyone on the internet, we respect the fact that a lot of things that happen in the artist community do need to stay in the artist community. So we don't name names when we're not supposed to name names. So just relax. I can see the clicking and the furious typing. Just calm down. It's going to be all right.
It was never anybody that it was always guys that I really liked, that I was friends with. But there was one band, and if I'm being 100% honest with you, I can't remember the name of the band. They were on tour, and I was already double dipping on the tour, but it was on the first Family Values I did with Evanescence in 2007. And I had done the second record for a band called Blood Simple, which I love that record. It's one of my favorites that I've been a part of.
It's also a great 80s horror movie. Continue.
It is a great 80s horror movie. And the name of that record is called Red Harvest, if anybody wants to check it out. Fantastic record. But anyways, they were on that tour too. So I had asked Amy, hey, listen, these guys are coming out on this tour. They don't have a drummer. I can save them some money to make this work for them by just playing for them. And she was totally cool with it. So I was playing during the day with Blood Simple and then at night with Evanescence. And it was so fun for me. But there was another band on that tour, Mikey Doling, from the guitar player from Snot.
Yeah.
A couple other bands, super cool cat. He was in, and their drummer had to bail. And they were more like a Mr. Bungle type band, which fascinating,
totally.
But not my lane, you know what I mean? And they were like, dude, can you do this? And I was like, I'm already playing with 2 bands on this tour. I could play with 3. And then I started listening to it, and I'm like, this is out of my lane, dude. Like, I don't like this. I don't gravitate to this because it would be a total learning process for me because it's not natural. So I had to, respectfully decline that. And
did it hurt? Does that make you feel like, do you feel bad when you tell someone no, as someone that basically plays drums for a lot of people? Do you take that personally, or is it more of a like, nah, this was the right thing and you let it go?
No, no. I mean, I only felt bad because I couldn't help them out. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But I didn't want to get up there and make an ass of myself either. I mean, there's a saying, and I remember and again, I'm not even going to mention the name of this band either, but on Gigantour, when I was out with, who was I playing with on that? Oh, Device. It was the project that I had with David Draymond from Disturbed. And we were on Gigantour, and Hell Yeah was on that, Megadeth, blah, blah, blah. There was an opening act on that band. Black Label was on it. This is after I played the sax. And their drummer did not last the tour. I don't know what happened, but he just was gone. And so they needed a guy. And again, it was the kind of thing of like, you know, they were a little out of my wheelhouse, but I'm like, look, I'll give it a whirl and I'll try it. And I did one show with them. And Zach pulled me aside. He said, Foggy Willis. He's like, here's the deal, bro. He's like, there's a reason that lions hang out with fucking lions. They don't hang out with fucking hyenas. You understand? And that was it. He walked away. Nice. And I'm like, okay. And so I went back to the guy and I'm like, guys, I'm sorry. I'm not going to be able to do this anymore.
Wow.
Like, I'm not playing anymore with you guys.
But that sounds about right.
It's totally right. And he was not wrong. You know, the fucking reason lions hang out with lions, not hyenas. So I don't know. You just got to choose your battles.
But it's worked for you. I mean, I again, to something we talked about earlier, your reputation in the industry is that you're that guy. You're the guy they call when they need that style of drumming and someone they know they can live with. Like someone that's going to, like you said, have some sort of identity that isn't based on what they're doing in the moment. Having a family, I found, helps. The more you're on the road, having something that grounds you at home always helps. And then ultimately, you have this really unique kind of situation. So I wanted to ask you, from a playing standpoint, throughout your career, you've done the raw rock thing where it's just dudes that get up on a stage and that's it. And also with even bands like Evanescence, where you've got full production, where you've got these massive stages and you're probably synced to a click. You've got all kinds of stuff going on. Do you have a preference as a player to which one you enjoy more, or do you just enjoy them both the same?
I enjoy them both the same, and but with a caveat that is eventually, because playing to a click, I feel like takes a lot of the idiot guesswork out of it per se. Because one thing that I've realized after playing with a click for so long live is that, you know, depending on what night it is, how much sleep you've had, how interactive and cool the crowd is, stuff like that. Like, you know, the click doesn't lie, but inherently from night to night, songs can feel slow, songs can feel fast, but they're the same as they were the night before, the night before that, the night before that. And so what it does is it takes, you know, the guesswork out of it. And it also takes out the guesswork from the rest of the guys that you're playing with, turning around at you and looking, going, speed up, slow down, speed up. It's that kind of thing. And, you know, when you're not on a click, we're human. We can move around. So I pride myself on, when I'm not on the click, of having a really good meter. You know, I can hold it with the best of them. But it takes some time when you're playing with a band that you're the new guy coming in. They've been playing with a guy without a click for years, and they're used to the way that moves and flows. But once you get in there and you kind of solidify yourself, and the trust happens where they trust you and you trust them, and you know, they know, hey, man, this guy back here laying it down, just lock in with them. Everything's going to be good. Once that happens, then everything's golden. And I love that too. That was how it was with Black Label. You know, and it took a minute. They've been playing with Craig for 12 years at that point, and he had a groove, his thing. And so they had to kind of get used to me for a minute, and I had to get used to them. And, you know, JD, the bass player, and I became such a great rhythm section and great friends, and really locked in together. And, you know, and it took a week of shows, but once that happened, man, it was like, fuck yeah, dude. And I love that. It's great.
Well, Black Label is like rock and roll high school. I mean, if you're lucky enough to get through that operation, I mean, and you're always a better player on the other side of it. It's like a master graduate class. So many cats have had that opportunity, and you look at where they're at, and it's evident that the one thing they all have in common is time and Father Zach's, you know, company. So it's a good thing.
And his with his regimen.
Yeah, exactly.
Because he pushes everybody. You know, he pushes everybody, pushes himself. I see it. Yeah. The guy gets up in the morning, you're sitting there having coffee with him at 8 a.m. in the morning. He's got a guitar in his hand, running scales, drinking coffee with Led Zeppelin on. He's just warming his fingers up. And the guy lives and breathes it, and JD lives and breathes it. And when you're in that band, you just kind of, it just elevates you.
Zach Wilde has the very unique disposition of being one of the few human beings you can see executing the practice of not giving a fuck about most things. And
Yeah.
the one or two things that he actually does care about becomes so evident and prevalent in any the slightest interaction, or even just looking from a distance. You can clearly see what's important and that everything else is not. And that's rare. You know better than anyone. Super rare. A lot of people talk good game, but you got to give props to people that live it, and the proof is always in the pudding. So that's pretty
And
spectacular.
he does. He does. You know, you can tell like his priorities in life are his guitar playing and his physique, and his family. Probably
Right,
the
but
physique and the
the
family
three-
are right around the
but-
same. But
But success, like he wins, right? It's like, yeah, he wins. He
Totally.
wins the rock and roll. So let me ask you this
Absolutely.
question. I'm going to swing back to your drumming because something I've mentioned this to you before, and you gave me an answer and I forgot. You sit really low behind the kit. You do.
Yeah.
You're a low. How is that? I don't even know how you get the angle or the power that you get, because I can't sit as low as you. But it's like it's super impressive. Was that? Did you even think about that, or was that just the natural? Like this is how I've always done it. I never really thought about it.
well, actually, it was it was a happy accident, I guess. Because when I got my first, whatever you want to call it, drum kit, which was not a good kit. It was not pretty. It was very ugly. It did not sound great. But as far as I was concerned, I had a kit, but what I didn't have was a throne. So what was in the garage was a paint bucket, and so a 5-gallon paint bucket. So I pulled the 5-gallon paint bucket in and put a somehow I wound up with the bags that they bring pizzas in.
Yeah.
I would carry my cymbals around in that bag that they delivered pieces in, because I couldn't afford a cymbal bag and I couldn't afford a throne. So I would put my cymbals on and I'd put that bag on top of the throne to give me a little cushion, or on top of the paint bucket, and there
That
you
was
go.
it.
Then
Wow.
that's it.
That's amazing.
That's how you
That's
do it.
amazing. Well, and it obviously worked because you got comfortable enough to. That's where the throne's set now, at pizza bucket height. We'll call it the pizza bucket. Wow. That's
Pizza bucket.
well, and so, but that also, because you jump right now, you're jumping between a bunch of different projects. Well, we talk about drums. Do you change your configuration or your sizes for the different artists, or like, for instance, are you playing the same kind of setup with Evanescence as you are with Heroes and Monsters, or are they two totally different animals? They look similar because they're Black Pearl kits, but what's that like for you?
Yeah. Well, one thing is, the answer to that question is hell no, because the Evanescence kit is this sculpture thing.
Yeah,
and
it's pretty awesome.
I have a lot of components with that kit because there's this very huge electronic element that happens in Evanescence that I play a lot of. Like a lot of people, even on the record, say, "Oh, that's a really cool loop." It's like, no, I actually played that. These are things that I played live, and I have Tommy Lee to thank for that. Learning how to infuse a full electronic kit into an acoustic kit. Because he's the one that really showed me how to do that. But with Heroes and Monsters, I don't really need that electronic element because that's more of just like a rock band. I have a pad or 2 pads that I can kind of hit some samples with when I need them. But so number one, there's not as many components. There's not the huge rack. It's just more of a stripped down rock kit. Single kick, 1 up, 2 down.
Yeah.
John Bonham kit, and which I got to get some new pieces for, because on this last Italian tour we were robbed.
Oh, but Heroes, we'll get to that in a second. Well, that's going to tie into something else I want to talk about. But with Heroes and Monsters too, it's just 3 of you, which is this bare bones stripped down sort of rock thing. Although you don't sound stripped down, to look at it, it's kind of, to watch you guys play live, it's it's an illusion, because you're like, how the hell is all that sound coming out of? It's not like there's walls and walls of stacks and it's like just the 3 dudes playing and singing. It's like, it's crazy. And then you go see Evanescence and you're like, I wouldn't want to have to manage any of that gear for any of those humans, because it's
it's a lot.
It's a world, right? It's a whole ecosystem. So I think that's just a super cool. That's a cool position for you to be in, to be able to, like, okay, tonight I'm doing the big, huge, Hollywood style, like we're playing to 50,000 people in Puerto Rico, and then I'm going to go fly over to Italy, and we're going to play for, 2,000 people in this club or at this fest. I mean, that's a cool,
200.
right. But that's a very cool disposition to be in. So I'm I'm super stoked for you. I'm not
It
stoked
keeps
that
you
stuff got
humble.
stolen.
No,
You know?
I mean, it keeps you humble, man, but it also kind of reminds you, like I said this in the last one that I did. It's like we played a show in front of maybe 500, 600 people, but I mean, these people were right in our faces.
Yeah.
And that club was hot, it was sweaty, and these people were going off, dude. Like there was a point at it where I was like, man, do we need to stop? Because shit was going everywhere. They were tearing this place up, and the owner was standing on the side of the stage, and I was like, we finished the song, and I looked at him and I said, do we need to stop? And he was like, no, get God's song. You're
Yeah.
playing. I'm like, okay, dude. He said it was okay, so tear this fucker off.
Well, and so two questions then. So do you find, because you are literally an international man of mystery. You're playing all over the world, continents, country. Do you? I know that you have to say politically correct the right thing, but is there one part of the world where the crowds are the best? Literally, from your perspective, where you're like, these crowds are like, oof, they get it.
South America's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, they are into it. But I mean, that's not to take away anything from the UK or anything.
Of course not.
From, I think the toughest crowds, okay, the most judgmental crowds by far, leaps and bounds, are in the United States.
Of course.
Because they are just like, if you get them to do this, you're doing something great.
Yeah.
And then, in the case of like Korn or people like that, you see them and people go ape shit. It's like, that's a tough thing to do, man, in the United States.
So we're talking about unfortunate circumstances of things getting stolen while on tour, but I think you'll correct me. Obviously you were there. It was a year ago, 2 years ago, you're with Evanescence, and the absolute worst case scenario of any major arena stadium kind of tour that could happen. It happens. They're pinpointed throughout history in different spots, but the riot breaks out at I forgot where I forgot where you were in South America.
Mexico.
You were in Mexico, and
Mexico City.
Just walk me through. I remember talking to you after it happened, and it's easy to laugh about it on the phone afterwards, but I can't imagine in the moment when you realize this is going to go south. Like this is one of those weird movie, like, holy shit, is this about to happen? Tell us about this particular story. I don't think a lot of people stateside really know about it.
Well, first of all, it was the most rock and roll thing that I've ever been a part of. Number one. And it was a really sad situation, but it was just the craziest fucking thing because we, in the very short version, what happened was that our security guy at the time, this guy, Rikk Currence, he was the guy that was with Limp Bizkit forever, and he was with Limp Bizkit when the whole Woodstock thing happened. So he had a little bit of know what in terms of like seeing something and identifying some things that could happen. And what went down was our sound guy went out. It was a huge festival. There were 5 stages. It was not Fest. And on the stage that we were on, the main stage, Behemoth played, and then there was a break, and then we were going to play, and then there was a break, and then Slipknot was going to play. There were multiple bands before Behemoth, but then on the other stage, Godsmack headline. I mean, there was a shit ton of bands at this point.
Yeah.
And so our sound guy goes out to get ready for our set on the break, and there were barricades the way they had them set up. So instead of being what's the word I'm looking for? They were horizontal to the stage instead of being vertical to the stage like that. Right. Or they split them in half. They split them in half from front and back and then on the sides. And at the backside, near the soundboard, our sound guy went out there and he saw the barricades doing this and people just running through them. So he radios back. Richie goes out, checks them out. I hear Richie radio back. Nope, they're not bolted together. The way that these barricades work is people stand on them and then they're bolted together so that they don't move, they don't break. They can take a tremendous amount of force and without breaking, it really keeps people safe. So he walked the whole venue and realized that the only barricades that were bolted together were the ones directly in front of the stage. So there was no crowd control whatsoever. And he was just like, listen, man, he's like, if we go on like this, people are going to get hurt. If Slipknot goes on like this, people are going to get killed.
Yeah.
They're going to die. And so the promoters went out. I was like, okay, we'll fix it. So they go out there and they start zip tying these. They don't have the bolts. So they start zip tying these barricades, and this is
Oy.
taking time. And this just keeps going. And, we're supposed to be on, right? And another hour goes by, we're in a holding pattern. Another hour goes by, we're in a holding pattern. We're like, hey, we'll play. And Slipknot's like, hey, we'll play. We don't care if we go on at, 2:00 in the morning.
Sure.
We'll play. There's no curfew. So we were all in it to win it, like, hey, if they get this fixed, we'll do it. Well, it's a perfect storm. 3 hours late on that stage. All of the bands have finished and been finished. And then the people selling concessions and things like that, like water and beer and all that stuff, they spike the prices up. So now you've got, 50, 60,000 really pissed off Mexican people out there that had been price gouged and don't have any information, and they weren't going on stage and they weren't saying anything. And then when they finally came on and said it, the crowd erupted. When they said, hey, that's it. Evanescence isn't playing, Slipknot isn't playing. This is like 2:00 in the morning, man.
Oh.
And it just went south real quick, and the barricades ruptured.
Oh, you mean the zip ties didn't hold? Oh, who would have thought?
The zip ties and the duct tape
That's
did
crazy.
not do it.
That is
Note
crazy.
to self. And they came on stage and they went apeshit, man, and they started tearing apart our stage because our stuff was up there to play. So it wouldn't have mattered if it was us. It wouldn't have mattered if it was Slipknot. It didn't matter who it was.
Yeah.
They just started doing this. So we had an exit strategy. So when we knew this was going down, we went out the back. And I just remember, and this is all happening, and I remember looking across this field from behind the stage. And I told my drum tech, I said, listen, this is a guy that's been with me, this guy JCDC. And I told him, I'm like, listen, if this shit goes down, just make sure you grab the drum brain. We need the fucking drum brain. It's got all the information. We need that. We can end our show with that. He's like, I got you. So we're headed to the van, and I see him running from behind the stage, like running for his life. And he's got my drum brain under his arm, and he's running like OJ in the Hertz commercial, dude. He is just flying. And I get goosebumps thinking about this. And then I'm looking at this, and I'm like, man, he's hauling ass. And then, 100 feet behind him, there's like 600 Mexican kids chasing him. And I'm like, Jesus.
It's like that scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark where he's running to the plane and the natives are behind him.
Exactly the same. Exactly the same. And I'm like,
God.
oh my God, he made it safe. He was okay. The drum brain was safe. But yeah, man, I mean, it was just unfortunate. We lost a tremendous amount of gear. I got back to the hotel. The local news in Mexico City had come on. I clicked on my TV, and there's this helicopter flying over the venue, and I can see I had a chrome pearl kit, and I can see my chrome kit in a bonfire in the middle of the field. I'm like, that's my fucking drum set. I'm like,
man.
It was just crazy, dude. I mean, it was one of those things that, in the end, it worked out in terms of getting the gear back and stuff.
Sure, but still in the moment, you've got to think to yourself in the moment, maybe is it time for a career change, or but that's the rarity, right? I mean, but still, you're here to talk about it. And like I said, I remember us nervously laughing about it when you told me about it the first time, because I'm picturing it in hindsight. It's so ridiculous to save a drum brain, right? We both agree. It's like the fact that we would put anyone's life or limb in jeopardy for a drum brain. It's funny now when you look back on it. At the time, you're like, no, you got to do it because the show's got to go on and we're going to have to play tomorrow. And so at the time, it makes total sense. But picturing this dude with a TD-50 under his arm and 9,000 people chased him, it's still one of the greatest visuals in my mind from the story ever. And
if I had the wherewithal to get my phone out and film it, if it wasn't so like a drastic situation, I would have filmed that, and it would be so viral.
But you've been doing this so long, and that's for obviously those are not the rule. That's the exception to the rule, and that's a horrible. I mean, again, the other irony being, out of all the people you piss off the Slipknot fans. Not a good idea. I don't know. I don't know who's running that rodeo or what the translation is in Mexico, but el no dono pisso those people off. That's not a that is not the music fan base you want to aggravate. Moving
piss
on.
off the Mexican maggots, man. They're
No,
fucking
you
come
just
after you.
whew, clearly they win. That was probably the most Slipknot thing to do, for them to burn the entire place down to the ground. I mean, I'm sure Corey and the guys were kind of like, well, that's cool. I mean, at least they're living up to the expectation. They were like, yeah, that's
Like I
that's
said,
good
that's the
stuff.
most rock and roll thing I've ever been through. I mean, it's like, we're all safe. Everybody made it out alive. No one was killed. Okay. Now we can look back on it and go, okay, that was, rock and roll. It's fucking one of those things, man.
So let me ask you this question, because we talk about getting older and you've been doing this for a long time. Do you ever worry about aging out at any point in time and thinking to yourself, you can't hit that hard or you can't go as long on the road? Is that ever something that you kind of look at?
Yeah, I got one name. You know what I'm going to say. Tommy Aldridge.
Yep, exactly.
I mean, come on, dude. The guy's like 74 and he'll give any 20-year-old a run for his money.
It's not even a competition. You know what I mean? It's
not. He's still hitting as hard as he did when he was 20. So I strive for that. So that's why, every day I get up and I do something physical that I know is going to prolong my career. I do something, and I stretch a lot, and my wife is a yogi, and do a lot of yoga, but I keep my cardio up. I do strength training. I do all that stuff because that's what's going to keep me in the game.
How much of that program for you is diet, since you're on the road a lot? How do you mitigate that? Because a lot of what keeps us healthy or keeps us going is what we put in our body. How do you?
Yeah, totally.
Was there a point where you learned that the hard way on the road, or have you always been conscious that ultimately garbage in, garbage out kind of thing?
Well, I always been conscious of that for sure. I think, in my life, weight, I guess, has always been a problem because, really what you want to be is you want to be Tommy Lee playing with the shirt off with a pancake belly. And, and as a drummer, and this, when you sit down, there's no hiding anything. No. Like you are, if you have any fat at all, you're going to see it.
That's it, yeah.
And so I just, what I do now is I have like a pretty strict diet in regards to, show days, even days off. Like, and I really don't eat a ton of food, like crap. I don't have breakfast. I don't do stuff like that. But what I do is I eat, I take a lot of like vegan protein. I take a lot of, I eat like a lot of nuts. I eat a lot of stuff like that during the day. And then I have one big meal at night. And then I'm not that guy that's eating all the after show pizza. I've learned how to not do that. None of that for me. No after show food. What I'll have is some like, and this is not glamorous, but I'll have some like some popcorn, some really, somewhat healthy popcorn. And that works for me, I guess. And then on days off, show days, I'll make sure it's like salad, chicken, bland.
So you're aware of it though. I mean, you're there.
Totally.
You're thinking about it. You manage it because it gets out of hand quick on the road. I mean, again, depending on where you are, what country you're in, what's available. Do you have any, because you travel so much and you're used to it, did you have any allergies or like things you had to start to adapt to on the road that would catch up? Like, are there certain climates or foods or anything that you sort of have to deal with on the road from that standpoint? Because I know that can also be a nightmare.
Knock on wood, man. I mean, the only thing that really has affected me per se would be like seasonal allergies and shit like that, stupid stuff. But you can take a Claritin and clear that right up. And then, and nobody likes getting sick on tour. I mean, that's the worst fucking shit ever. And well, I just pump some shit into my body that, again, knock on wood, that I stay pretty fucking healthy out there. The whole bus can be sick, and it's happened multiple times, and I don't get sick. And whether that's from what I'm putting in my body or how much I sweat at night, that the shit comes out of me, or I'm sweating the gym, whatever, I don't know, but it's working.
Well, that's all that matters.
That's all that matters. I'm not going to guess it. I just keep doing what I do. But the only weird thing I ever had happen to me in terms of like a food allergy or something was in Italy. And I had a kiwi. And I've eaten kiwi a bunch, but I had a kiwi, and all of a sudden, man, I felt my tongue starting to swell up. And I was like, what the fuck is happening, man? It was just the weirdest shit. And I was having a hard time swallowing, and I'm starting to kind of freak out. Like, I'm in this room with full of Italians, and I'm the new guy in town. I'm like, oh, I was like, I'm gonna chill, relax, and lucky it went down. But man, that was it. No more Kiwi for me. That was,
That's
no more laugh.
crazy. Well,
It's
okay,
crazy,
so
dude.
as we wind this down, we talk the live part of your career. I think we could talk about the live part of your career for like 6 or 7 more hours. But I want to focus on just you've also done a lot of recording, and
Yeah.
obviously the two are very different skill sets in some ways, and the same in others. And I wanted to just kind of talk to you. I mean, you've played on some pretty awesome records. Do you find that everything you do live or would want to do live in a song, for instance, on a band like Evanescence, does that translate in the studio as well, or do you have to sort of change your approach for that recording process? Again, you have such a distinct style to your playing. It's very
Thank you.
physical, which is I think I'm kind of getting at.
Yeah.
So, do you
Yeah.
find that you've got to change that up for the recording process? And if you do, how do you approach that mentally?
Well, I think it's always been kind of a weird thing, kind of like, as you know, you're always top, like you want to put as much energy as possible into your performance in the studio because that transcends on tape. And, you know, uh, I think that there's a fine line between like, beating the shit out of a kit in the studio and also finessing a kit in the studio because they're different. It's a different kind of thing. And I look at playing live like that's like the football game.
Hmm.
That's when you get physical, you know what I mean? But I look at the studio a little more like playing a game of golf. Like there's some technicalities and some things that you do in the studio that you need to be more cognizant of that you aren't necessarily cognizant of in a live setting. And like to that point, on the last Evanescence record, there's a song called "Broken Pieces Shine," and when we were doing a lot of the writing for that record, I had a small electronic kit just for the writing part, and because things are tighter and you're not slamming those, but they sound
Right.
massive. I kind of adapted to playing that way from a writing standpoint and really didn't care about the show or how am I going to play that live because I was able to do some stuff that, technically I wasn't really good at live because I'm playing so hard and performing. Um, and I just kind of went with it. And that song was one of those tunes that when we went to go rehearse it live, I'm like, shit, man, what did I get myself into with this? And Amy does it too. Like she says it. She said this before. Like she goes in and she writes these melodies. She's like, I keep telling myself that I'm not gonna try to sing in the stratosphere anymore on these songs. But then I get in there and that's the note to go to, and I just go
Right.
to it. And it's just like, but that's what you do in the studio. You make the song as good as you can make the song and not worry about it live.
Sure.
And then you figure it out,
Yeah.
and she's put a lot of time into figuring that out, how to sing, and really did a great job on this last run we did. She sang so strong. And then, it's same for me. Like I figured out a way to, all right. And you become a better player for that. I think a better performer. So I think, it's a push and pull in that aspect, but yeah, I think, it's a little bit of a different dichotomy between
When
live
you
and
look
studio. For sure.
when you look back at all the records you've recorded, now you're gonna have to play favorites. Is there one album where when it's done, it's mixed, everything's ready, and you hear the way the drums sound, where you're like, oh, that's my favorite drum sound of mine ever?
Uh, Man, probably, I know this is cliche, but probably this last Evanescence record. I mean, we really worked hard on, um, making those drums sound the way that they do. Nick Raskulinecz, the guy that produced it, and Amy was really fucking cool about it. She was just like, you guys do what you want to do, make it killer, and just didn't, hamper us at all, or didn't, kind of like, okay, it's getting a little too crazy. Um, I really love that record. I really love the Blood Simple record, Red Harvest. That record came out amazing, and from a
Mm.
playing standpoint and a sonic standpoint. Um, and another record that I love, these are my top three, would be the second Scrape record, which is called Up the Dose. And the guy that engineered and produced that and mixed that was this guy, Jimbo Barton. And Jimbo, if you go back, Jimbo did 3 Rush records. He
Oh,
did
wow.
Hold Your Fire, Presto, and something else. As did Nick Raskulinecz. He did 3 Rush records. And then, but anyways, Jimbo, this is a sound that we got off the floor through an old Neve console, insane sounding. And that record probably ties, or second or third with the first Start New Day album, which Ben Grace did, who's just fucking incredible.
Wow.
So I don't know, man. I mean, there's some that and I'm not going to name them where I'm like, well, they sound okay.
Oh man, I was just about to ask that question. Which ones are the ones where I knew you weren't going to. I knew you were going to pull this shit with me, where you're not going to be mean to anyone. Fair enough. That's why you're a consummate professional.
I will say this: the first Scrape record, which was called New Killer America, it's the one with the really gross fingernail on it.
Yeah.
That record was done by a guy named Ulrich Wild, and Ulrich Wild forever was Terry Gates' engineer. He engineered Around the Fur and Adrenaline, the Deftones records, which we were huge fans of, and so he did our record. And at the time, really wanted my drums to sound like Deftones. And when it came back, they did not sound like Deftones. Like all the space in the mix was taken by the guitars, which fucking sound incredible. And I didn't really understand it at that time, but when I went out to LA to do recalls, he looked at me. He's like, "Look, man, he's like, you gotta look at it this way. You gotta look at it in a sense of, you wanted it to sound like Deftones, but what it sounds like is you."
It's true.
And I'm like, and you listen to it with a fresh set of ears, and now that I listen to that record now, I love the way those drums sound. They're fucking great for that record.
Yeah. Well, it's contextual, right? Everything's different. You can't say the Evanescence drum sound is I'm just curious because drummers, especially guys that play within the same genre, the same field like you do, a lot of times it's like, this is my sound. I hope somehow it translates. And you are like this chameleon where, I could hold up this Michael Sweet record you played on, and I could hold up this Evanescence record, and I could say, do you think this is the same drummer? And just based on the sounds, they'd be like, it's probably not. So I was just curious if you ever had sort of those experiences where you're like, well, I kind of wish all the records sounded like this. But to your point, then they wouldn't be other records. They'd be a completely different thing.
They have to be, and drums have to have their place in that mix because it's the foundation for all of those records, and they have to fit that sound. They have to elevate everything else around them, and there's got to be space for everything else around them to kind of come in. And I've learned to adapt to that. It's a mental thing. It's a thing where you have to look at the big picture, be more of a producer. Like, how's this all going to fit together? You know what I mean? And I think that's a huge part of it, that you just have to mentally open yourself up. Now, granted, if it sounds like shit, you do something about it. And luckily, I've been doing this long enough where I can identify, like, no, that's not right. We got to fix this, but I haven't really had that situation. The thing with the Evanescence record, really quickly, is that with Nick Raskulinecz, we're both geeks about, records and stuff like that. So we went down this wormhole about Pyromania, Def Leppard's record. Oof. And, everybody has gone, okay, how the hell do they get that sound? And, they use a floor time for the snare, put a snare on the bottom of it. There's all these tales of lore about that record. It's
the like, HR-16 drum machine and all of it. Yeah. Wow.
All that shit. Well, we went down the wormhole and we found out some interesting things about that. And we kind of took that as an idea. And what we did was we tracked my drums, right? And then we put a PA in the room. And we put my samples out of Superior Drummer, the ones that I use in Superior Drummer, which fantastic piece of software, people. And we basically dropped those samples in with my drums, and then we piped just the samples through the PA in the room with no cymbals. And what we did was we were able to really crank up and compress the shit out of the room mics. And when you do that with a full kit, the thing that really comes through that is the snare and the cymbals. They're really loud. They can be really harsh, and it's hard to kind of really use as much of that room sound as you might want to use.
Right.
But by doing it this way, we were basically able to tune the room like, okay, cool. The snare's too hot. Pull it down a little bit. It's a clean signal. There's no cymbals. There's no nothing. And we just did that and ran the samples through the room mics, and we're able to really squash them and use a lot of them, and put that on top of my recorded drums, the close mics of me playing in the drums, and just the samples going through the room. And it's really unique sounding, and it sounds cool as fuck.
Well, it's like you said. I mean, that's another 8-hour conversation. But some of the greatest records in the world using sort of a drum. They call it the drum PA technique, where it's like let's do that, and not always to the manner you're talking about with the samples, but whether it's let's just put the kick and snare through big 18s and record. It's a lot of people don't realize how fun making major label records used to be, or still can be when you have people that are creative, because everyone's kind of spoiled by the technology in some ways now, where it's like, well, that's already done for me. It's already. And that's not a bad thing. I'm just saying there's something to behold when you're sitting behind a drum kit and there's a PA in the same room with you just playing your drum kit and you're feeling it, and it's like you want everything to be like that always, and then you realize it can't be like that always.
It can't be. But I mean, the thing, it's like, did we have to do that? No.
Yeah, you can though.
We did.
Why not?
And it was fun, and it paid dividends because we were both, all of us, everyone from the band to Nick, we're extremely happy with how that came out. Like, man, that's unique, and it's very fucking cool, and it was fun. And that's the most important thing. Like, at some point you have to remember in this crazy ass business that you gotta have fun,
Oh, preach. Okay, listen, I have one more question for you, and I do, and it's relative to what we were just talking about, because I'm finding with drummers in particular, it seems to be more of a black or white conversation. So the question becomes, do you collect or have some sort of drum set, snare drum? Like, are you a gear? Are you still into gear? Are you still picking up drums and drum sets and snare drums? Or are you just sort of like, what I have is what I have. I'm good with what I have, and I'm just moving on. Now, I'll say the two camps are this. There's the eternal, if I see it, it's an old guy that geeks out about a WFL, or a Ludwig Pioneer. And then there's this is the other side of the story I've heard more often is, I used to have a bunch of stuff and then I got tired of all of it, so I sold it, and now I just have these three things. Those are the two camps I seem to find most. And this is unique to drummers. No guitar player has ever been like, no, I only have my two guitars. It's every guitar player's like, no, I have closets full of guitars.
Right.
So where do you stand on the gear debate with just drum stuff? Where are you at with that?
Well, here's the thing. Here's the difference between guitars and drums, all right? There's a couple. Number one, guitars are a lot easier to store. They're much smaller footprint, and you can have multiple guitars, like Troy and, guitar player in Evanescence, also guitar today with me, and another project that's coming out, but Killington Pitt. But he has all his guitars. I don't care how broke he's been. Well, seems the time that he pawned one and was arrested for robbing a bank when he went to go deposit the money. That's another story. Yeah. But he's got all his guitars, right? Different podcast. But but with drums, dude, they take up such a massive footprint, man. And as we were talking about in this business of up and down and up and down, it's just like, dude, I would need a really big warehouse storage facility to store everything that I've ever had. And going back many years, I didn't have that kind of fucking money, and it certainly wasn't going to spend it on storing drums. I got what I fucking need, and I'm going to play the shit out of it, But I've kept the General League. That's not going anywhere.
No.
I have the black Pearl kit that they custom made for me back in 2011 that I use out a lot of stuff. Yeah. And that's one of my favorite. I'm in love with that Pearl kit. It's just amazing. But anyways, I do have, and I can pull them down, but I've got, a pretty good collection of snare drums.
Sure. That's our vice. That's the drummer's vice. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And, it's just like, but what happens is that when you go into a studio, you make a record with one of these guys like Nick or Ben Gross or whatever, they have snares, and they have snares that they really love. And they don't tell you, no, you can't use your snare, but what you know is, and what you learn as you get, older in this business, you learn like, okay, there's a reason this guy's using this collection of three snare drums, because he knows how to make them sound incredible.
Yeah.
But luckily, Nick was really open, and we used a couple of nice snares, but the snares that he used and has fucking insane, dude. So it's just like, we use what we have, but I've got one drum, man, that it's the drum that came with that Black Pearl reference kit, and it's a reference snare that I kept breaking the lug casings on them. I was snapping them in half. And so what they did was they sent me some of the tube lugs that they had that had the same drill points.
Yeah.
And so we retrofitted this reference wood snare that's the one with the thick shell. It's like 24
totally.
ply.
Yeah, it's a 20 ply. Yeah.
Yes, huge. And so we retrofitted it with these tube lugs. So not only did it make it sound better, but it made it look really unique. And that drum is all over records I've done. It's insane. I've nicknamed it Blackbeard. And then there is, and they just started making these again. They're an aluminum ultracast drum. And it's a
Nice.
really thick aluminum shell. And that drum, when you hear it, it is so unique and so different sounding than anything else out there. Like, it's like, oh, there's that drum. Um, it's on the song, one of the songs that it's on that last Evanescence record is called Fear of the Dark. And it's an amazing fucking drum.
Shout out to Pearl for all their support for
Shout
Will
out to
and his
Pearl,
career.
man.
Shout out to Pearl.
Good. Making
Wow.
dank stuff, man. Dank.
So, as you look back on where you're at now, you've got a long time. If you're going to Tommy Aldridge age, then we're going to be doing this podcast thing repeatedly over and over again. We're going to have lots to talk about. So as you,
Another
but
20
as you,
years, bud.
yeah, as long as you stand where you're at now and you look back on it, is it what you thought it would be? Is it better, worse, indifferent? As you obviously at some point in time you're like, this is what I want to do with my life. You've been doing it with your life most of your life now. Where's your head at about that decision? You missing
That's
law
deep,
school?
Rick.
Do you wish you'd have gone to law
That's deep,
school
bud.
now? Still in, well, I mean,
Yeah,
you're a
exactly.
success story. My point is, the old adage is always true. Be careful what you wish for. You may get. I mean, and you're one of those guys. You didn't just get it. You got it. I mean, you did the whole thing.
Yeah.
And you started by playing for one of your heroes. That's normal where people end their careers. Like, oh, I've worked up to playing with people I admire, one of my heroes. And like your first big, hey, everybody look at Will moment is, who's the guy behind the General Lee on Tommy's band? So now you're here. You have all this stuff in the rear view. You have so much going on. Is it what you thought it would be?
No.
For better
I mean,
or
it's
for
not. I
worse
mean,
or indifferent?
I think that, again, like, and I've had this conversation with many people, and I think that, okay, everybody that sets out in whatever career that they do, unless you're just a very strange person, but people that set out to strive at what they want to do, they want to be successful. Okay, well, define success, right? Because that can have a lot of definitions. And I think that when you're young and you're looking at this, successful, and you want to be in a rock band, successful means that you're like Tommy Lee, that you are a gazillionaire, you have all the hottest women in the world falling at your feet, and when you're 15 and you're looking at rock and roll, you're thinking that's successful, right?
Right.
But as you move up into this whole thing, it's not necessarily about that. It's about making music that you love. It's being able to, support yourself. And it doesn't mean that you're living glamorously. It's like, I'm very blessed to have the gigs that I have had. I'm very blessed to be in Evanescence. But one thing that I'm not, filthy rich by any means, not even close. But that's not, and again, it's just like, okay, well, I'm not successful. Well, that's not the case, and for me, it's not that I'm the richest guy or that I've got gazillion dollars in the bank. It's that I've been able to make a career out of this, where I'm playing music, doing what I love to do. I'm traveling and seeing the world. I have a beautiful family, a beautiful wife, a beautiful daughter. I've been able to, take care of them, get my daughter through college, things like that. And that to me is success. I'm still growing as a player. I'm still able to grow. I'm still able to write songs. I'm still able to do all these things, play with all these different people. That's success to me. So yeah, I think I'm successful. But also success doesn't have an ending. I want to continue to be successful. I'm going to keep pushing. I'm going to keep working harder than the other guy. I'm going to do all the shit that nobody else wants to do because it's hard. I'm going to keep doing that because I want to keep being successful. That's the jam.
Look,
for me.
From my vantage point for you, I am so excited about Act 2 of your career that I don't even know what to do. I can't contain. I know that it's going to be amazing. I have no doubt in my mind that you are just getting started.
Ready.
So it's like,
bring it on.
And I need you. So just thanks, man. I mean, look, we take this podcast pretty seriously, even though it's not out yet. At the time of filming, we're filming this before it's out. There's a secret. But when we set out to do this, we wanted to talk to people, like I said at the beginning, in the industry that just have great stories. I think so much of music has become many things, and whether or not they're all good or not is a story for another time. But if it's one thing we wanted to focus on was that the community of music and people making music on every level and at every gig and at every capacity is still just awesome. And we all feel very fortunate to be a part of it. And I have to tell you that we're just super humbled and grateful that you took some time out for us today, man. I'm always grateful just that I'm in your life, but I appreciate you more than you'll ever know. And we're big
Thanks
fans.
for being in my life.
That's my
You've made a
privilege.
huge difference in my life, man. I mean, I can pinpoint certain people, there's a handful of them that have done things, whether they know it or they don't know it, that have really helped me out and really helped propel me to that next stage. And you are definitely one of those people. So, and I mean that. That's not smoke. That's not bullshit. That's right here. That's Will fucking Currence saying that.
This is very, and I am beyond humbled. And since I'm not good, you'll understand this because you come from a psychological family. Since I'm not good at taking compliments, I'll deflect now with something else. I'll completely and thoroughly shit the bed and just say, we're looking forward to talking to you again. So thank you so much. We wish you all the safety, all the best on the road. Hope your family stays good. Thanks for joining us. You just heard us hang out again with Will. Check out everything he's done and then some. There'll be links and information on the pod. You know how this works. I'm not going to treat you like you don't know how videos and things work online. So just figure it out. But I'm Rick. Thanks as always, for joining us on the Sound Horizons podcast brought to you by Toontrack. And we look forward to seeing you the next time around. Be safe out there. We'll talk to you soon. Salud.